This episode of the Blaxit Global Podcast is sponsored by Blaxit Global Passport. Join aspiring Black expats, and repats, where you can build community, get resources, and gain support along your journey abroad. You're invited to join Blaxit Global Passport. Inside Passport, you'll find exclusive workshops on everything from expat taxes, financial planning, insurance, job boards, accountability check-ins, and more. You can even take Passport on the go with our app available for iOS and Android devices. Just click the link in the episode you're listening to or visit blaxitglobal.com and click on Passport. See you inside.
It was interesting, to say the least. It was shocking. It was overwhelming. It was, at the same time, beautiful.
Close your eyes and imagine living a life you love. Unapologetic and unbothered. Free from daily microaggressions from Karens and Kens. Free from the fear of police brutality and systemic racism. Wouldn't that feel amazing? Now open your eyes. What if I told you that it's possible? Hear inspiring stories and get the actual blueprints from brothers and sisters of the diaspora who are living out their wildest dreams abroad. You've heard the term, now be inspired by the movement. I'm Krishan Wright, and this is Blaxit Global. I am so excited for this episode of the Blaxit Global Podcast. For those of you in the Blaxit Global Facebook group, you may remember my next guest from our launch party that we did with Juanita Ingram. She is the producer, the executive producer of the Expats International Ingrams. But that is not all of her list of accomplishments. She is a wife, a mother, an attorney, as I mentioned, a producer, a pageant queen. I'm sure I'm leaving out a bunch of other things, but she's also a philanthropist. And we are going to have what I know to be a lovely conversation because she is joining me today from Singapore. Welcome to Blaxit Global, Juanita.
Thank you. It is so great to be back. Actually.
Yes. So for those of you who don't know, Juanita and I actually had a conversation when she was because she was in Taiwan before she moved to Singapore. And so it was like, oh, okay, now you're moving to Singapore. Let's put a pin on this one and we'll pick up the story in a new country. So You are well-traveled. You've lived abroad with your family in London and now most recently Taiwan, and you're in Singapore. And like I mentioned, you have so many accomplishments, and I want to unpack your story because you originated from Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Yes.
So let's start there and give the folks a little something about your life in Tennessee.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I love Tennessee. I still love Tennessee. I still love home. Chattanooga will always be home. And my family's still there. You know, my mother, my father, my sister, all of my family. We have some people in Atlanta, a couple in New York, but that's where we're based, and that was home. And I didn't leave the US for the first time until I was 27, my honeymoon. And so I am a Tennessean through and through. I went to Tennessee State University, HBCU, for undergrad, and went to law school in Memphis. So I was straight Tennessee for a while, and I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. I grew up what I know now, having met so many other Black people from abroad who have come from a variety of different backgrounds, that I did have a bit of a unique upbringing in that and I still have friends, very close friends that I've known since I was like 2 or 3 years old. And I think it shaped the identity of who I am in terms of my Blackness and awareness and the sort of maturation process of identity. Because my mother was an educator for 32 years. My father was a vice chancellor at a university, so education was very important, but I realized I grew up in like this all Black environment. where, you know, Different World was very much like a documentary of my of my life. I went to like this all black kindergarten, nursery, first grade through elementary, middle school was all black, high school was all black. Then I went to an HBCU. I was in culture shock when I went to law school to a predominantly white school, and I was like, this is so weird. And I was in
It's like,
shock.
who are y'all?
I was like, wow, y'all don't help each other study? That's strange, because it was like Tennessee State University, I think, in addition to being from Chattanooga, but, it was just a beautiful time in life. Literally, it was like a different world. It was human, and that was real life where everybody poured into you. Everybody loved you. You were inherently great. I remember Dr. Holt, who was over the honors program at TSU, just constantly telling us how wonderful we are and how great we are and how we're going to be, outstanding at everything that we put our hands to. And it was such a nurturing environment. And growing up in that type of environment was a blessing. It's funny because on the show, Zoe is one of the main characters on the show, and she's this, Black Scottish woman who grew up in Scotland. And I told her, I was like, I've been to Scotland, girl. I didn't know there were that many black people there. And so, and, and she was like, oh, Juanita, that's my Zoe impression. Oh, Juanita, you're so black. You're just so in tune with your blackness. And I'm like, yeah, and she and I had some really great discussions, and I did not realize how unique that experience was. And people always ask me like, where exactly in America did you did you grow up? Like, what neighborhood was that? But I think many of us have that experience, and it has been a blessing. I have traveled to over my husband and I just celebrated our 17th wedding anniversary.
Ooh,
And he and I
happy
count
anniversary.
oh, thank you. And he and I counted, and we've been to over 30 countries. That from a little girl from Tennessee who hadn't left the country until her wedding day. It's been a journey of growth, but I think the foundation and the grounding that gave me has still served me to this day. So,
It sounds so picturesque in a lot of ways,
hmm
even though I grew up in the Bronx in Co-op City and it was quite diverse at that time. One thing that I think, for me, I was watching, Cosby Show and Hillman, and like, Different World on TV. You were
hmm
actually living that. And like you said, being able to have that foundation, that support, that nurturing has in a lot of ways, as I think about, what I've observed in my research of you and our conversations and your evolution as a woman, your progression in your career, and even, having watched the show and how you raise your children, your children are being raised in this like international landscape. But also, as you mentioned, education is always at the center of that, and being able to be really using the world as their classroom, and yours as well. I
hmm
think that's one of the things that struck me as I started to learn more about you and your journey. So you mentioned that, you hadn't been out the country before your wedding day. And
hmm
so you and your husband, you guys are charting out, you're having all of these experiences, probably, neurons are firing and all this other stuff. So when did you both decide, like, hey, not only do we want to do this again, because people say, oh, I want to do this again on vacation, but
hmm
you all, you picked up your children the first time and they were pretty small when you made that first journey step. So what was that whole conversation like?
Yeah, my kids were so young. The first move, it was 10 years ago, actually. Then when we moved to London in 2011, and I knew I didn't have any evidence, but I'm a person of faith. I don't like to say I'm a spiritual person because that means a lot of different things. I am a person of faith, and I prayed before we got married, and we were contemplating where we were going our honeymoon, and everybody was like, "Oh, go to Punta Cana or go to Florida, go to Cancun, why do y'all, why do you have to go so far?" And I honestly had this feeling that we were going to live internationally. I had no reason to think that. I had never left the country. I had no evidence of that. That's why I said, I preface it, say I'm a faith person. I pray a lot. I sit and get still a lot, and it was just heavy on my spirit. And I was like, no, I think we need to go like out of the country for the first time. And so when he came to me years later, and we made a commitment every anniversary that we would go to a different country and that we would just keep going, and we would use that as our annual vacation, because both of us, I was practicing attorney. You only really get one vacation span, and so the well, our honeymoon, we went to Rome and Florence. Second year, we backpacked across Spain. Third year, we went to Paris. Fourth year, I was having children. And then, lo and behold, it was time, and they called him and said, we want you to move to London. I think, had I not traveled before that, had I not had that feeling that that was going to happen and been comfortable with it, I would have been in complete and total shock. Not sure I really would have done it, or felt that we could do it, and felt confident enough that there was something that we could do. So the first time he had that conversation, I had mixed feelings as a trailing spouse, as they call it. I had mixed feelings because as a lawyer, we don't tote well. It's not like you can just pick us up, plant us someplace else, and I can just keep on doing it. There's this whole licensing thing, and nobody sits for the bar exam, takes exams, and passes bar and does all this work because they don't want to be a lawyer. I mean, I know some that do, but that wasn't me. I loved the traditional practice of law, and in most regards, I loved helping people, and I had found my niche by that time. Gone through, the law firm pains, and had pretty much, set up. I was in-house counsel at the time for Rolls Royce. I had, as my mama would say, a good job, Don't you quit that good job. That was the messaging.
Don't give up that good job.
Don't give up that good job. That's good. Making good money,
Good money.
And so, right, good money, as opposed to bad money, whatever. But I think I would have been in shock if there was still some feelings of, in the back of my mind. I thought they were in the back of my mind. They were in the forefront more than I wanted to admit. The first time I stepped away from practicing law in the traditional sense. And I spent the first 4 months in London when we arrived, because my son was 15 months old, my daughter was 3. I was still breastfeeding my son. So they were really, really small. And I spent the first 4 months, I did not know I was having trailing spouse syndrome or trailing spouse depression, because there's a part of you that says yes. There's a part of you that knows that this is the best decision for your family. My husband's getting a job promotion. This is going to be good for us. And then there's a part of you, or me, that said, what in the world? What am I going to do? What does this mean for my career? What about the plans that I had? Because when you get married and you support, and you take the background to their foreground in many regards, at least professionally, I had to do a lot of soul searching, because you also, as Americans, we have a tendency of equating our worth with what we do, our identity, and especially you get into these doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs, we are notorious. I am Juanita the attorney. And if I am not Juanita the attorney, then what am I? And honestly, that was a painful process to figure out, what am I beyond what I do. And I cried for 4 months straight every day, because it was not easy. So you go through the natural settling in that's already hard, and you go through that process, but then you add in having been a woman with a career. I did not give myself permission to mourn. I was trying to tell myself, I don't miss anything. This is great. And it was. And this is what I want. This is going to be fine. And I don't miss the practice of law. And I don't miss the trajectory that I was on. And this is best for our family. So this must be good. I must be excited about this at all times. I did not give myself permission to be a full dimensional being and allow myself to mourn what I was giving up, which would have helped me to move forward. And so my advice to trailing spouses all the time is, especially as women, I tell people all the time, I don't have a ministry for men. Y'all, if it's a man, go talk to my husband. I don't know. But for women, I only know I stay in my lane. I only know what I know. For women who, especially women who are giving up or transitioning, not even giving up, but who are going into a different season in your career, give yourself permission to admit that you may have wanted something else and that this is the path that you chose. You said yes. Cannot beat your spouse up. You cannot blame them for your sad days. There will be days because you are agreeing to starve a certain side of you. You'll find a different way to feed it, but hunger pains will come. And it's okay. I wanted to be a judge by my 10th year of practice. That's not going to happen. And now I may have a judge show, it may manifest differently, but that's okay. But when I watched all my friends become judges and I knew what they were doing in their careers for that path, I had to tell myself, Juanita, you wanted that, but that's not the best. And I didn't believe that until I gave myself permission to mourn it. I got a life coach. There are expat life coaches out there that will help you as a trailing spouse navigate purpose and identity and this whole space. And once I did that and she weaved it all together for me, I had to convince myself first of the space that I was going to. And then after that, it became so clear and so easy. And then I started two-stepping all up in the trailing spouse role. And just
But
love it.
that's so important, and I'm so grateful that you are so vulnerable in sharing that part of your journey, because you might not have had the forethought when you were in it to identify it as a syndrome and the depression that comes with it. But what I
Mm-hmm.
love about it was that you sought help, you found that expat coach that could help you with
Mm-hmm.
identifying what was going on, but also give you tools and skills to help you manage through it. Because I think without it, what could happen is that resentment of your
Yeah.
spouse, falling into a victim mentality and thinking like,
Mm-hmm.
you did this to me, I was supposed to. The regret, as you mentioned, seeing other people, make those career moves. But I think
Mm-hmm.
there's, what I hear from you is like this acknowledgement. And what happens, or at least what I've been observing as of late, well, at least, for me, I'm in my now towards the late 40s, getting to this season of life where there's more perspective and less identification with title, but recognizing that there was a part in my life where, if I didn't hit this, and like you said, it's that American way of life. And now in this new season, I like look at, different things or headstones, and people don't have their title, MD, Esquire,
Mm-hmm.
like, right. It's what are you remembered for? Mother, wife, child, whatever that it's what difference you made to the people who loved you most
Yeah.
is what you're going to be remembered for when all is said and done. And so, like I said, where I am in this season, it gives me a little bit more perspective and less attachment to those things that really at the end of the day, they're accomplishments, acknowledgments. But what matters most to me is, what difference did I make in the lives of the people that I love most and who love me most? So I
Yeah.
love that we sat in that space and that you shared it. You talked about purpose and
Mm-hmm.
finding purpose with the coach, which is a nice segue
Yeah.
to Purpose Productions, your production
Yes.
company. That is really your company that you created to also serve as the vehicle for your show
Yes.
and your journey to Taiwan and now in Singapore. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk a little bit about you making this, career jump in a way to
Mm-hmm.
explore your creative side, which most attorneys don't really sit in that space.
A lot more than you think, though.
Really?
Oh
Tell
yes,
me.
a lot. And part of the journey that my life coach had me to do was to actually do. She was like, "I'm surprised you haven't done this. Do the research, Juanita." And I'm like, "Research? Say less." I'm like, that's what she does. And so I started researching lawyers who did other things, who, and like I didn't even know there are a lot of actors that are lawyers. Like Matthew McConaughey was discovered while he was in law school. I didn't even
I
know he
never
attended law
knew
school.
that.
The lead actor in the movie 300, lawyer, got fired from his job for going to a film festival and like one of the top law firms, I swear to God, in the country. Like there are so many. And when you think about, and I had to do the research because she was like, Juanita, here's the thing, whether you are leaving the country and decide, I want to live abroad or I want to do whatever, people start projecting their stuff onto you. And there are so many boxes that people want to put everybody in. We all get our own special box. And then someone hands us the lid and we put it on ourselves. And it only takes a moment of clarity to pop that lid off. You may even put yourself in the box. You may not even need any help. But for me, when I stopped practicing the traditional practice of law and I started really taking the opportunity for what it was and seeing, hey, I got a whole new season in my life. And there were some things that I really loved to do before I started adulting. And now I have the privilege and the opportunity to explore those things. And I was called everything from flighty to dingy to having a midlife crisis. And I'm like, first of all, I'm only in my 30s. Nobody has it. It's not even midlife yet. I mean, part of this is probably because I need to mature a little. I mean, like who? I'm 33. Like it was at that time. Like this is no. I'm not having a midlife crisis. I'm actually coming into my own. And I started doing the research on I didn't know Gandhi was a lawyer. When you think about Clive Davis, who runs Jive Records, Harvard attorney, who discovered Whitney Houston, all of these different lawyers that had this creative side or these different skill sets, and then they use their skills in a different way. So I decided, and she made me read this book called Whole Brainers, which was about not being left or right brain dominant, but accepting yourself as a whole brainer. Because you get a lot of flack. People think that you're all over the place. I mean, the whole Blaxit community, I'm sure people are like, why do you want to leave? Well, is it that bad? Why would you? And everybody wants to know why instead of just letting people be and just letting people do them. But I did the research, decided, production companies are just a way of handling the money. But I decided to go back and start acting when we were in London. And I just said, what if I go and audition? What if I get an agent? Maybe I get signed, maybe I don't. But taking that leap of faith. And so I started out acting again, got some award nominations and all these things. You take the limit off of yourself and allow yourself to explore and really take advantage of the new season that you're in. And then when I came back, we moved back to America briefly before moving to Taiwan. And that's when I really decided I want to get behind the camera as well and create opportunities and empower women and tell some stories that otherwise you may not hear about, or do things in a way that really benefits us. And I had this idea for a talk show. It was called Legal Notion. It was on Facebook Watch. And I was paying this production crew to do it. And then I started learning how to do it myself. And then I was like, I need a company. So I started a nonprofit called Purpose Production. And we are solely focused on empowering women and putting forth stories for marginalized narratives and voices that empower people. And I had the idea for the show right before we left London. It just wasn't the time. But I knew when they were talking about us going back to Taiwan, and I always knew we would live internationally again. Even after London, it was almost 5 years, came back, I knew we would leave. I just knew it. I just had this feeling. And when they started whispering about it, I'm like, roll the cameras, because this is it. This is the time. And all the drama happens when you're moving. People don't realize that. Like, once you're settled in, it's cool. You do cool stuff. But the dramatic stuff that people need to know about happens in the transition. And it's all about navigating change.
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, my name is Catalina. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor and a babe with a mobility aid.
My name is Haley. I'm a PA with POTS and a water allergy. We are the hosts of the Doing It Disabled podcast.
Haley and I are on a mission to create an honest dialogue about living with disability and chronic illness. We would like to open up our corner of the internet to both learn and teach about the lived experiences of the disabled community.
Join us as we navigate this world that was not created with us in mind and watch how we do it disabled. Head on over to Spotify and check us out.
Oh, absolutely. And I won't give too much away because I want to encourage people to watch. But you had no shortage of transition, let's say, because you were making the move to Taiwan. I know there were some weather-related events. There were also, some more serious health-related issues.
Yeah.
And then let's not forget the granddaddy of all health is the pandemic. As the backdrop, really, that served as the backdrop to both moves, Taiwan and now Singapore. So let's talk a little bit about that transition to Taiwan before we jump to Singapore, because that was your first time living in Asia. And so what was that whole experience like for you?
They got to watch the show. It was interesting, to say the least. It was shocking. It was overwhelming. It was at the same time beautiful. It was all of those things, all wrapped in one. It was a true culture shock because, moving to London is very different culturally. Even English, British English and American English is very different. Words mean different things. Please don't refer to your trousers as pants. You're going to embarrass yourself. Don't do it. But moving to a country where there's truly a language barrier and not visiting, but living is a total difference. And it was huge in terms of also our kids who are true third culture kids now. They weren't babies anymore. And they had friends and they had a life. And that move and transition for them, it was a heavier lift. It was a different type of lift. It was totally different. In Europe and oftentimes in that particular continent, we had options. Like my kids attended a British school. They started out in a British school just because that's what I wanted. Not because I couldn't get into the American school and there was a shortage. And, when you apply, however, for schools in Asia, and I've heard this across the board in many of the countries in Asia, you are truly applying to school. When you're in Europe, you might be registering for school. It is a difference. And we learned that in Taiwan the very hard way because we didn't even know for sure that by the time the company told us for certain that we were going, it was already too late to get our kids in. Like you literally need to apply for those schools a year ahead of time in places like Taiwan. Even here in Singapore, which our kids got in, but it's not the same as in other countries like in Europe it's just not the same. And I've talked to many other expats and I did not know that was going to be the case. And so to parents who are out there thinking about moving with children, it's very doable. I encourage it. It's a great experience. But if you're going to apply to schools, you need to really talk to other parents and find out the timing of that. Because if you plan on going in Taiwan, you better apply a full year ahead of time. And you still might get waitlisted, even as an American, even for the American school. Yes. And that's just the spacing issue and availability and capacity issues that they have. And that's a reality. And it was funny because the American school, I was like, well, why is it full of Taiwanese kids? Like, why is that? It was just, it's totally different. But
Whoa.
yeah. So I think Taiwan was hugely impactful. I love Taiwan, and I'm cautious about what I say because I loved our experience there. I loved the beauty of the country. I have a lot of friends that are there, and I say this all the time. You cannot escape racism. It's everywhere. No matter how great of a place it is, there's always people. Sometimes it's a matter of not necessarily being intentionally racist in the way that we know it in the US, but they're the microaggressions that still are birthed from stereotypes that they've only seen a certain type, or haven't experienced anything different than themselves. Taiwan is very homogeneous in makeup in that way, in terms of population, compared to Singapore, which is the total opposite. People talk about Singapore, they call it Asia Light, or they're like, oh, it's the London of Asia. And it is. It is. I'll put it this way. When I was in Taiwan, I used Google Translate at least 6 times a day.
Whoa.
I have not opened the app since I moved here.
Wow. So let's double click on that.
Yeah.
And not to necessarily do like the compare and contrast, but I think it is a nice little segue into your time now in Singapore, because you've been there now for a while. You hadn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, you hadn't been to either place before. Had you been on vacation to Taiwan or Singapore before?
No, so I went on a look-see trip to Taiwan before we moved. We went twice actually, because we went once, then the company was like taking a long time to make a decision about where people were going to go, and then we had to go back again to actually pick a house. So I went twice to Taiwan to visit before we actually moved. And then while we were living in Taiwan before COVID, we took a vacation to Singapore and spent a week here. And the funny thing is, I'm telling you, I'm a person of faith. You have to watch what you say, and your words really have power. We were walking in the gardens when we were here in 2019, and we have been in Taiwan for like 2 or 3 months. The kids' fall break. We were in Singapore, and I was walking through the gardens, and I stopped. And my husband was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "If there's a place outside of Taiwan in Asia that I could live here. I really would love to live here." And my husband was like, "That's really strange, because that's not going to happen unless I change companies. And that's probably never going to happen, because at that time the company he was with, they had just closed their office in Singapore." So he was like, "That's not going to happen." And I said, "Well, you just never know," and kept walking.
Whoa.
And here we are. I just have these feelings sometimes that, just come. And I don't have those about anybody else. So don't call me, what I'm saying? Don't ask me. I'm not that girl. I am not that girl. Okay. I don't. And so I have it about myself. The Lord talks to me about me. Trust me, that's a large conversation. I don't have time for conversation about other people. But I did have that feeling. There is no comparison. Every country has, every city, pros and cons. So, I now love the experiences we had in both. Difference that I felt as a Black person was, I honestly felt like I exhaled when I got here to Singapore, just because there were no daily microaggressions that I dealt with. No one cares that you're here. They clearly are used to seeing us, being around us. Now, that's not to say it's perfect. It's not to say that the occasional microaggression may not rear its head. It is occasional. It is not often. In Taiwan, and we deal with this in season 2 a little bit and talk about it, there's no perfect place. It's not to put Taiwan down at all. It's a beautiful place, lovely. I have a lot of friends that are embracing it. I think sometimes it's generational. It depends on exposure. But there are times in Taiwan where, in the building that I lived in for 2 years, every time I got on the elevator, somebody jumped. Yes. And I'd be lying if I say that didn't happen. Are there times often when I would sit on the bus and someone would get up and move because I sat down? Yes. And I'm not the only one. And that's the kind of, but no one's going to, shoot you or kill you. Police are very friendly. There's
Facts.
no, I'm saying, I just tell people all the time, you can't escape racism, but you can live abroad and experience it differently and survive. It's not life threatening. It's offensive, it's annoying, but it's not life threatening. And so when I get on the elevator here, do people jump? No, they don't care. I just think it's a difference in being Singapore is a very diverse environment. Not without every place has pros and cons. It's not perfect. There's no perfect place. It just reminds me a lot more of London than probably any other place in Asia. And that's why they call it Asia Light, because all the street signs are in English. And it's very hard trying to be vegan and you can't read the ingredients and you got to take out your Google Translate and see. There were these greens that we ate there that I still don't know what they were. I treated them like collards, but they weren't a collard. I don't know what they were. It was like if a collard and the spinach had a baby, maybe with a little bit of bok choy cousin. That's what it was. I don't know what it was, but it tastes great. So, it's kind of those type of day-to-day living experiences. And we even touch on that in season 2, where I'm like doing shopping all wrong, trying to go to all these bougie places, trying to find my little vegan meals. And my friend Zach is just like, girl, if you get up in these wet markets and figure it out, come on, like, let me take you to go get the best fried tofu. Like you're not doing it right. So it's been a great experience. We did continue filming for season 2 through the pandemic and through the first lockdown really that Taiwan had this past May, where we were doing great and then we weren't. And moving from Taiwan to Singapore in the middle of the pandemic was a journey. And I don't want to give away too much because we're just now entering into beginning stages of post production. We're still filming a little bit here in Singapore, and it's been a journey, and it's a lot. We touch on a lot of different things. Interracial dating is a big theme for season 2 because that was something that my husband and I could not speak on or give. We're highlighting a lot of other Black expats in their journey, a lot of other people and what it is that they're experiencing. And it's a beautiful experience and conversations, interesting, funny. We're always, it's always, well, I'm silly, so it's always going to be some funny in it, but it's real, it's honest, it's fun. There are some tearful moments, some cheerful moments. It's everything that, we're hoping that season 1 gave and then some. So that's
Oh
where
my
we're
gosh, I'm so
at.
excited. I'm so excited. So one thing I do want to circle back on, because you made a comment earlier about your children when you made the move to Taiwan because they were settled and had friends and were older. And so
Mhm,
now that much older, right, for
mhm.
Singapore, without giving too much away, because I'm sure it's tackled on the show.
It
How are
is.
they adjusting just in the whole?
Ooh.
We'll be right back.
Does your business bring you more problems than an old used car? Do you have more things on your to-do list than you can possibly get done? Well, the good news is you're not alone. Every week, we are talking with business owners about their successes and failures with running a business. The stories and lessons are amazing, and I guarantee you will walk away with actionable advice. Hello, this is Tyler Martin. I'm the host of Think Business with Tyler. I have successfully scaled and sold 2 of my own businesses, and along with my guests, we share strategies and actionable information with you. I'd be honored to have you listen. Go ahead and hit the link now and give it a listen.
It's on the show. Kinsley's a teenager. When you met her, she was 10 or 11. Kinsley's 13. And, turned 13 in the pandemic. And we have real conversations about, what we talked about at the top of the show was my background and my upbringing of this stability and what that gives you. And the fact that I was on my 25th high school reunion, was it 25? Yeah, I'm old. I lost track. I think it was 25. Yes. And I looked on the Zoom because we did it over Zoom. And I saw faces of people that I just forgot that I don't remember not knowing them. I forgot that I'd known them since I was 2 years old, or that our mothers were teachers in school together and were pregnant together. Then we had known each other literally since the womb. Some people on my class, like there's one person I've known Tasha since third grade, went to middle school, high school. She was my valedictorian. I was drum major. We marched all 4 years in the band at TSU, and she's my line sister. And now sits on the board for Dress for Success Chattanooga. And we didn't even, and we travel, and we didn't even put together that, like, because I've known you my whole life. So I talked to Kinsley on the show about the fact that, I've got these experiences and you don't. And how does that make you feel? And it is a difference moving abroad with a teenager and the experience of that, and how, again, with every decision, there are pros and cons. Oftentimes, I still think, and she still feels, that the pros outweigh the cons in terms of her development, being a third culture kid, multilingual. She's seen 28 countries. There are a couple of trips that Daddy and I took on our own, to get our alone time. But other than that, our kids have been everywhere. And that has truly been a blessing. However, the balance of that is what we show on the show also, and getting to those real conversations about leaving friends and having to start over. And what does that mean? And what does it look like? And how do you feel? Which is a real consideration for parents. I think there's a real good dialogue to open that door if you're considering moving with your kids, to see these hopefully well-adjusted kids, as well as they can be adjusted with TikTok and everything. Now, I don't envy their generation, honey, at all. I was telling a friend of mine that I met here, can we try for an arranged marriage? Because I feel like these kids gonna struggle. They don't have the 90s kind of love experience that we had. Like, it's just, I'm thinking 15 years from now. I'm just thinking ahead. But just having the experience of stability and of continuity, and even cousins. Growing up, family time, it's very different for her, and for my son as well. And so, yeah, we talk about it. I won't give away how she feels or anything like that, but
No, don't give it away, because I want to
it's a
encourage
real,
people
yeah,
tune in.
yes.
But this is like a little appetizer, right?
Yep, absolutely.
to get them, excited about it, as I am to see season 2. So, Juanita, as we start to close, you're in Singapore. You and your family are having this experience, and it's, again, still within the backdrop of COVID, of course. But what is next for you? Like, what do you think is on the horizon?
That's a very good question. Which side of me? I think that's the deeper question, because there's I've surrendered to the fact that God gives us all different lives with different levels and different number of highways in it, different lanes. Some of us have a 2-lane highway, some of us have 3. I happen to have 5. And so, depending on what lane I'm driving down,
you got the super highway.
yeah, I'm just like, whew, this is hard to navigate. Thanks, Lord. But no, but I'm grateful. I'm very grateful. In terms of the show, we're wrapping up season 2. I am in talks with a lot of people. It's so funny, when we were trying to shop season 1 and no one could see what we were talking about because no one had done this before. This is the first show about being Black and abroad, that's reality or otherwise. I mean, it's the first time that you even see people living abroad, about expats, period, let alone Black people. And so people couldn't figure out if it was a travel show, is it a lifestyle show? They couldn't see it. And now everybody's interested in the show now. So it's like, people are like, oh, is season 2 going to be on Amazon Prime? I don't know. We'll see. I just love the show. And so the goal for the show has always been to franchise, for there to be an expat Switzerland, and expat Sweden, and expats London, and expats, South Africa. That's always been the goal. And that's what we'll continue to strive for in terms of purpose production. We did launch our streaming platform back on Juneteenth. Excited about that because so many people were saying they didn't have Amazon US or Amazon UK anyway, so they couldn't see the show. So it was really a response to demand. But in looking at different opportunities to grow that for other content makers so that we have the opportunity to be on a platform and basically eat what we kill. It's a fairness issue. I never take my business hat off, never take my lawyer hat off. I'm looking at the landscape of content and ownership being so important and protecting narratives. So I'm exploring the options. And in true lawyer fashion, I know I'm saying I'm exploring the options. Most of the time, by the time I talk about stuff, it's 10 things in the works already. I just know that you can't tell everybody everything until I will just show everybody once it's done. People talk too much. So, but there's that. I'm working on another book. Hopefully that'll be out in March, called Heavy is the Head, and it's about female leadership and my experiences of being the executive producer and leading as a Black woman in various cultures and continents. I'm still chairing the board and still the founder for Dress for Success London. And also I just launched in Chattanooga. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. It's not easy leading Black and abroad either. And so that book will come out in March. And in terms of, being a mom and a wife, that's always the most important things to me. And we're going to continue to travel and, take a break once I'm done editing. I'm going to go back to editing after this. This has been a nice break. Thank you for allowing me to come up for air.
Hey, thank you for being so willing and forthright to share your incredible story and incredible journey. And, I always love having, these touch bases with you, and I'm really excited for when season 2 comes out. And if we want to do a launch party, throwing Blaxit Global on the list. But for people who want to follow you outside of watching the show, of course, where can people find you?
My website is iamjuanitaingram.com. And I am Juanita Ingram is my social media handle for everything. So Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok. That's my handle for everything. For the show, it's the expatshow.com, and that's the social media handle for that as well. The show is streaming still right now on Amazon Prime UK and Amazon in the US. You can go to purposestreaming.com if you're in a country that you can't see it, or if you just want to be supportive and give me the $19.99 directly and not to go through the middleman. It'd be lovely. And every time I see someone buy the show on our platform, I am like so overwhelmed with love and joy. And I'm like, Juanita, you cannot stalk these people and thank them every time somebody buys your show on your own platform. But it is a beautiful thing to see because ownership is so powerful. We are a nonprofit. And so although part of the streaming proceeds are going to benefit Dress for Success in London and Dress for Success in Chattanooga. So we want to use this to empower other women all around the world. Yeah, that's how you can get a hold of me and stay in contact and stay up to speed on where things are and where we land and season 2 when it comes out and when and where.
Oh, that's awesome. And definitely follow Juanita on all the socials. Definitely support the show because ownership is important. Supporting Black content creators is equally important because that enables people like Juanita and myself to do what we do to serve the culture and change and affect change. So I am so thrilled that this journey is continuing and that we get to see and get inspired in all the things. So Juanita, it has been an absolute pleasure having you as a guest on the Blaxit Global podcast. Continued blessings and prosperity, and I look forward to more of you.
Thank
Your incredible
you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been great, as always.
Thank you for listening to the Blaxit Global Podcast. For more information on today's episode, be sure to visit our website at blaxitglobal.com. It's not only possible to live out your dreams unbothered and in full color, it is your birthright. Are you trying to sort out health plans, banking, VPN, and other connectivity for your move abroad? Well, have no fear, we've got you with the Move Abroad Starter Kit. Get yours today at blaxitglobal.com/resources. That's blaxitglobal.com/resources.